let's do this. Over the past few years, there's been this meteoric rise in the trend of nostalgia-based horror, where instead of people looking back fondly on stuff they grew up with, it's seen as unsettling or just flat-out scary. And while I personally think nostalgia is cringe, see my Nostalgia and Mother 1 video for more detail, it actually works pretty well in the context of horror, since it creates a bunch of different avenues and methods for portraying itself. For example, look at the whole every copy of Mario is personalized craze. Now, people created stuff like ROM hacks and ARGs to simulate something they remember from the game that no one else seems to. It works because a lot of us played the game at a very early age, meaning we weren't able to fully comprehend everything going on because our brains were like fucking jelly at that point. At the same time, there's still a level of uniqueness since everyone experienced it in their own way. And that's kind of the big appeal to nostalgia-based horror. People will remember something from their childhood but add their own perspectives or twist based on how they remember it. It's like building something out of Legos without a manual, you know? You'll make something, but it'll be different from everyone else's. And there's a ton of outlets for this little subgenre, like analog horror, or people making slowed down and reverb covers of Minecraft songs.
See, it's scary because of how bad they are.
But the one I wanted to focus on today is like the kingpin of the genre, and has become kind of a clusterfuck in and of itself. Liminal spaces. Now, I think by this point, at least 95% of people who use the internet have at least either heard of this term or seen pictures relating to it. Like, this isn't some niche subculture anymore. It's like Minion memes on Facebook by now. As a result, there are literally thousands of videos on YouTube about them. So it seems like society has a decent grasp on what they are. But just to be inclusive, for those who've heard the name but don't know what they are, I'll speedrun a synopsis to catch everyone up. Let me just pull up my timer real quick. Okay. A liminal space refers to a location or aesthetic that looks to be transitioning between two states of being. Oftentimes, these spaces appear to be abandoned and have architecture that's considered outdated compared to that of today's, as common ones include malls, schools, and playgrounds. And because of their appearance, it can cause a massive sense of unease since many of these bear striking similarities to places they have been before, though typically at a younger age. Sure, one may remember the idea of a location, but as time goes on, specific details and memories are lost, which is why many of these blur the line between fantasy and reality. So now these spaces are frozen in time, long forgotten by society and left to decay. Yes! PR, let's go! Now that we're all caught up to speed, it's time to discuss the big topic of today. Liminal spaces are stupid now. Let me back up. So for a while, there was a certain level of uniqueness to these pictures that gave them liminality in the first place. Because again, while these locations looked familiar to many, they still had a sense of eeriness that shrouded them in mystery. For example, I was introduced to them after watching Strangely Familiar Places with unnerving music. And back then, I didn't even know what one of these liminal spaces was. I was just creeped out because they felt oddly personal in some weird, twisted way. Hey, good advertisement, I guess. Or maybe because it was just playing the scary Earthbound music you hear in every iceberg video once it gets to the Abyss section. But as time's gone on, the criteria for something to be considered liminal has lowered so much, it's embarrassing. I know that's the case with every trend that becomes popular, you know, it slowly gets bastardized over time, like found footage movies or professional let's plays. But there was a very clear understanding of what made a liminal space work and why they evoked the emotions they did. Nowadays, that's been completely thrown out the window, since everyone and their grandma tries to be a liminal space photographer because they think it looks cool. Here's the thing. I'm gonna guesstimate that a lot of people who are into liminal spaces, like it's a hobby or something, only have the most basic surface level understanding of them. That's not saying they're an extremely deep and complicated art form, but now that liminal has become a buzzword online, the bar's been lowered to a point it can never be saved from. Like, even just going onto their subreddit, you'll see some of the laziest and pathetic excuses for liminal spaces ever. It's sad looking at some of this shit. Like, dude, that's just an electrical tower. I think the main problem with their current state is that people are caring less about the mysterious part of them and are trying too hard to make them look liminal. You know, they never really understood what made them cool in the first place and are only coattailing off of their hype for some good old views, likes, and attention. Because it's not just about having a picture look empty. It's what occupies that emptiness that makes it work. What do I mean by this? Well, take a look at this picture of a highway, which, by the way, are super popular amongst the bad liminal space crowd. There's nothing to this image that enhances your emotion or leaves room for interpretation. It's just an empty road devoid of anything interesting aside from being empty. Not to mention, this is something people see all the time in the real world, you know? It doesn't reflect on a specific time period or is related to anything else. It's just an empty highway. The best liminal spaces are ones that feel detached from society and the present day. It's like looking at a time capsule you have some vague memory of from long ago. You shouldn't be able to just walk outside and find one of these. You should stumble onto them by complete accident while exploring an abandoned mall and have one of those dramatic reveal moments in a movie. And I get it, not every liminal space has to be creepy, but like, what is this supposed to be? What emotions am I supposed to feel? Happy? Sad? Curious? Furious? Actually, yeah, that's how I feel right now. I know at the end of the day, these are just a bunch of silly pictures, but there was a certain draw to them that resonated with a lot of people. Whether it was because they were unsettling or eerie or comforting, there was more to them than what we saw at face value. Sadly, that's not really the case anymore, because nowadays anything that's empty and poorly lit can be called a liminal space. In fact, watch this. This is a picture of my bedroom. There's a liminal space for you. Call me a hipster or just a loser, but I hate it when something I like gets ruined by people I don't like. That being Redditors and other online degenerates. And I know in due time this pattern's just gonna repeat itself with the next big thing, but liminal spaces weren't overtly trying to be anything. It depended on your interpretation that gave them a meaning. I'll tell you what though. Normally in a situation like this, I'd end the video off on a depressing beat and say, oh, none of this matters and we're all gonna die alone, so there's no point in anything. But I do have an idea that might help with this little, conundrum. If you're ever on a liminal space forum and find one that's, like, actually good and isn't a stupid highway or public bathroom, just give it a little love, you know? A comment, a like, an upvote, anything to help distinguish it from the rest, so that anyone who's new to the scene gets a better understanding of them. I know it seems like I'm giving you homework, but it's not too hard to spread a little positivity every once in a while, especially since this is for a good cause, you know, giving people validation for rising above mediocrity. Also, if anyone's interested, I linked a photo gallery in the description of a bunch of cool liminal spaces I really enjoy, plus that strangely familiar places video I mentioned earlier. If you're easily impressionable or just plain bored, give them a little look-see. Hopefully my insight will help you discern whether or not a liminal space is good in the future, for the betterment of this cute little trend. But anyways, that's it. See ya.
And